The winter wind cut through the Dakota plains like a blade, carrying with it the scent of pine and frozen earth. Sarah Mitchell pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders as she made her way through the trading post, her boots leaving prints in the fresh snow. She had been traveling for 3 weeks now, moving westward from Philadelphia with nothing but a small trunk of belongings and a heart full of secrets she never intended to share. The trading post was crowded that morning, filled with trappers, settlers, and native peoples who had come to barter their goods. Sarah kept her head down, her long chestnut hair falling forward to hide her face as she examined a bolt of fabric. She had learned long ago that anonymity was her greatest protection. The less people noticed her, the safer she remained. But some people cannot help but be noticed, and some people notice everything. Chief Tahatan stood near the far wall, his presence commanding despite his stillness. He was a man of perhaps 40 winters, with strong features and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of countless generations. His people, the Lakota, had lived on these lands since time beyond memory, and he carried that heritage with quiet dignity. He wore traditional buckskin adorned with intricate beadwork, and a single eagle feather hung from his long black hair. Sarah felt his gaze before she saw it. There was something different about the way he looked at people, not with judgment or curiosity, but with a deep understanding that made her profoundly uncomfortable. She turned slightly, pretending to examine a cooking pot, but she could still feel his attention like warmth from a fire. The trading post owner, a jovial Frenchman named Baptiste, called out to Chief Tahatan in the Lakota language. The chief responded, his voice deep and measured, never breaking his observation of Sarah. Baptiste laughed and translated for the benefit of the other settlers. The chief says he hasn't seen you before. He wants to know if you're settling in the territory or just passing through. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she set down the pot. She had grown accustomed to questions, had prepared dozens of acceptable answers that revealed nothing of substance. Just passing through, she said quietly, still not meeting the chief's eyes. I'm heading to Oregon. My brother has land there. It was a lie. She had no brother, no family waiting anywhere. But it was a convenient fiction, one that explained a woman traveling alone without inviting too many additional questions. Chief Tahatan moved closer, his footsteps silent despite his size. When he spoke, his English was clear and precise, touched with an accent that made each word sound carefully chosen. It is a long journey to Oregon. Dangerous for a woman alone. The winter will be harsh. I'll manage, Sarah replied, finally forcing herself to look at him. His eyes were darker than she expected, deep brown like fertile earth, and they held a kindness that made her throat tighten. She wasn't accustomed to kindness. You carry pain, he said simply, and the words struck her like a physical blow. I can see it in the way you hold yourself, like you're trying to take up less space in the world. Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She clutched her shawl tighter, pulling it up to her neck, but the movement made the fabric slide down from her left wrist. For just a moment, a series of pale scars became visible against her skin, thin lines that ran in parallel, deliberate and unmistakable. The chief's eyes dropped to those scars, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity, which Sarah despised, but recognition. A deep, sorrowful understanding. How did you get those marks? He asked, his voice gentle but direct. In his culture, truth was valued above comfort, and evasion was seen as its own form of dishonesty. Sarah's first instinct was to lie, to offer some acceptable explanation about an accident or a childhood mishap. She had a dozen such stories ready, polished smooth through repetition. But something in the chief's presence, perhaps the absolute lack of judgment in his eyes, or the quiet strength that radiated from him, made her hesitate. The trading post continued its business around them, but in that moment, they existed in a bubble of stillness. Sarah looked down at her scarred wrist, then back up at this man who was essentially a stranger, and made a decision that terrified her. If I tell you, she whispered, will you promise not to treat me differently? Not to look at me with pity or disgust? Chief Tahatan placed his hand over his heart in a gesture of sincerity. I promise to see you as you truly are, not as your wounds define you. Sarah took a deep breath, and for the first time in 5 years, she prepared to tell the truth. Sarah gestured toward a quiet corner of the trading post, away from the bustling crowd. Chief Tahatan followed, his presence both protective and patient. They sat on wooden crates near a frosted window that looked out onto the endless white expanse of winter plains. For a long moment, Sarah said nothing, gathering courage like someone collecting scattered pieces of themselves. My name is Sarah Mitchell, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But that's not the name I was born with. I was Sarah Whitmore when I lived in Philadelphia. The daughter of Marcus Whitmore, one of the city's most respected physicians. She paused, watching Chief Tahatan's face for any sign of recognition. The Whitmore name had been prominent in certain circles, but he showed no reaction, only continued listening with that same steady, patient attention. My father was admired by everyone who knew him, Sarah continued, her fingers unconsciously tracing the scars on her wrist. Patients traveled from distant cities to seek his expertise. He gave lectures at the medical college. He donated generously to orphanages and hospitals. In public, he was the very picture of compassion and virtue. The word public hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. At home, he was someone else entirely. Sarah's voice hardened, years of suppressed anger rising to the surface. My mother died when I was 7. Typhoid fever. After that, it was just my father and me in that big house on Spruce Street. For a while, he seemed lost in grief. Then he started drinking. Not obviously, he was too careful for that. Just enough to blur whatever conscience he might have possessed. Chief Tahatan's expression remained neutral, but his hands had curled into fists on his knees. He said nothing, allowing her the space to continue at her own pace. The first time he hit me, I was 9 years old. I had broken a vase, an expensive one that had belonged to my mother. He struck me across the face so hard I saw stars. Then he cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again. I believed him because I was a child and he was my father, and what else could I do? Sarah's voice had taken on a distant quality, as if she were describing events that had happened to someone else. It was the only way she could speak of it without breaking completely. But it did happen again. And again. Each time he had a reason. I had been too loud, too quiet, too clumsy, too willful. I learned to read his moods the way sailors read the sky, always watching for storms. I became an expert at disappearing, at making myself small and silent and unnoticeable. But it was never enough. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window like ghosts. Sarah watched them for a moment before continuing. As I grew older, the violence grew worse. He was careful, always, he never left marks where anyone could see them. My arms, my back, my legs. Places that proper clothing would conceal. He was a physician, after all. He knew exactly how much damage a body could take without showing obvious signs. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing more scars. Some were thin and straight, others jagged and irregular. These aren't from him, she said quietly. These I did myself. Chief Tahatan's breath caught, a barely audible sound, but he remained silent. I was 16 when I started. The pain was the only thing that felt real, the only thing I could control. When everything else in my life was dictated by his moods and his violence, this was mine. I could decide when and where and how much. It gave me a sense of power, however false. She pulled her sleeve back down, her hands shaking slightly. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was hurting myself. But in those moments, with the blade in my hand, I felt something other than helpless. The physical pain was almost a relief compared to the other kind, the kind that has no visible wound. I tried to tell people. When I was 12, I showed bruises to my teacher. She contacted my father, who came to the school in his finest suit, all concern and charm. He explained that I was prone to accidents, that I was clumsy and imaginative and sometimes made up stories for attention. He was so convincing, so respected, that she believed him. She actually apologized to him for the inconvenience. After that, he locked me in my room for 3 days with nothing but water. To teach me the consequences of lying, he said. Sarah's eyes had gone distant, lost in memory. I tried again when I was 15. There was a woman at church, Mrs. Henderson, who seemed kind. I gathered all my courage and told her everything. She looked at me with such sadness, and for a moment I thought she believed me. Then she said that I must honor my father, that whatever discipline he imposed was surely for my own good, and that I should pray for a more obedient spirit. After that, I stopped trying to tell anyone. I realized that his reputation was a fortress I could never breach. Who would believe a troubled girl over a distinguished physician? Who would risk their own standing in society to help someone like me? Chief Tahatan finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. So you ran. Eventually, Sarah said. But it took me years to find the courage. I was terrified of what he would do if he found me. I'm still terrified. Sarah's hands trembled as she continued her story, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. Chief Tahatan remained perfectly still, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her recollection. I stayed because I didn't know there was any other option, she said. My father controlled everything, The money, the house, my future. He had already arranged for me to marry one of his colleagues, a man named Dr. Edmund Carstairs. Edmund was 42 years old. I was 17. The disgust in her voice was palpable. Chief Tahatan's jaw tightened, but he let her speak. Edmund was like my father in every way that mattered. Respectable. Charming in public. And I could see in his eyes that same casual cruelty I had lived with for so many years. The way he looked at me wasn't with love or even desire, it was ownership. I was a possession to be acquired, a pretty addition to his household and his reputation. Sarah stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. The wedding was planned for the summer of 1851. My father spared no expense. He wanted the finest celebration Philadelphia had ever seen. While he arranged flowers and music and invited half the city, I was dying inside. I knew that if I married Edmund, my life would be over. I would trade one prison for another, and this time there would be no escape. What changed? Chief Tahatan asked quietly. Sarah turned back to face him, and there was something fierce in her expression now, a spark of the strength that had carried her across half a continent. I met someone who showed me that not all people are cruel. Her name was Mary, and she worked in our kitchen. She was an immigrant from Ireland, barely older than me, and she had her own scars, different from mine, but no less real. A small, sad smile crossed Sarah's face. Mary noticed things that others didn't. The way I flinched when my father approached. The long sleeves I wore even in summer. The careful way I moved, like every step might trigger some punishment. One night, after my father had been particularly violent, Mary came to my room with salve for my bruises. She didn't say anything at first, just tended my wounds with gentle hands. Then she told me her story. Sarah returned to her seat, her voice stronger now. Mary had been in a similar situation in Ireland. An uncle who beat her, a family that looked the other way. She had run with nothing but the clothes on her back, worked her way onto a ship, and crossed the ocean to start fresh. "You're stronger than you know," she told me. "And you deserve better than this." Those words changed everything. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine escape not as a fantasy but as a real possibility. Mary and I started planning in secret. She had a cousin in New York who could provide temporary shelter. She had saved a small amount of money that she offered to share. We picked a date, 3 weeks before the wedding. The memory of that night was clearly etched in Sarah's mind, and she spoke with the vividness of someone reliving it. May 14, 1851. My father was attending a medical conference in Boston. Edmund had gone with him. The house was quieter than usual, with just the remaining staff. Mary had arranged everything perfectly. A driver she trusted waiting 3 blocks away. A train ticket to New York. A small bag with a change of clothes and what little money we had scraped together. I walked through that house one last time, looking at all the rooms where I had suffered. The study where my father had struck me for reading the wrong books. The dining room where I had choked down meals in terrified silence. The parlor where I had smiled and played the perfect daughter for his guests while my back bled beneath my dress. I felt nothing for that place, no nostalgia, no regret. Only a desperate need to leave before my courage failed. Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We left at midnight. Mary came with me, refusing to let me go alone. We made it to the train station just as the first light of dawn touched the sky. I had never felt so free and so terrified in my entire life. Every sound made me jump, convinced my father had somehow discovered our plan and was coming to drag me back. The train ride felt eternal. I kept expecting someone to recognize me, to grab my arm and demand I return to Philadelphia. But no one paid us any attention. We were just 2 young women traveling together, unremarkable in every way. For the first time in my life, anonymity felt like a blessing. In New York, Mary's cousin Ruth provided shelter in a cramped tenement apartment. Sarah found work in a textile factory under a false name. The conditions were harsh, long hours, poor pay, dangerous machinery, but she embraced it all because it was hers. Her choice. Her life. I cut my hair short and dressed plainly. I avoided anywhere that wealthy Philadelphians might visit. I lived in constant fear that my father would find me, but as weeks turned to months, I began to hope that perhaps he had decided I wasn't worth the effort of retrieval. His reputation would suffer far less if I simply disappeared than if he acknowledged publicly that his daughter had run away. Mary stayed with me for 6 months before returning to Philadelphia. She said she missed her position, but I think the truth was that she couldn't bear to see me still jumping at shadows, still unable to truly believe I was free. Before she left, she gave me her savings and made me promise to keep moving west, to put as much distance as possible between myself and my old life. So I did. I worked for a year in New York, saved every penny, and then moved to Pittsburgh. From there to Cincinnati. Then St. Louis. Each city was a stepping stone, each job another layer of distance between Sarah Whitmore and Sarah Mitchell. I learned trades, sewing, cooking, laundering. I became skilled at reinventing myself, at creating new histories that would satisfy curious employers without revealing anything true. Chief Tahatan studied her with new understanding. You have been running for a long time. 5 years, Sarah confirmed. 5 years of looking over my shoulder, of waking from nightmares where he's found me. 5 years of building a life from scattered pieces, never staying anywhere long enough to put down real roots because I'm always afraid he's coming. Her voice cracked. And the worst part is that I don't even know if he's looking. Maybe he moved on the day I left. Maybe he married off some other poor girl to Edmund and forgot I ever existed. But I can't stop running because the possibility that his searching is enough to keep me in motion. The weight of those words settled between them like snow accumulating on a roof, heavy and cold. Chief Tahatan sat in silence for a long moment after Sarah finished speaking, his dark eyes distant as if contemplating truths that existed beyond the walls of the trading post. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Sarah lean forward despite herself. In my language, we have a word, wakin, that the white man translates as sacred or holy, but it means something deeper. It speaks to a power that exists in all things, a connection between the spirit and the earth, between suffering and strength. Your story carries wakin, though it was born from darkness. Sarah frowned, not understanding. I don't see anything powerful about what happened to me. I see weakness. I couldn't protect myself as a child. I couldn't make anyone believe me. I carved wounds into my own flesh because I didn't know how else to survive. And even now, years later, I'm still running from a man who might not even be chasing me. How is any of that strength? The chief leaned back, his weathered hands resting on his knees. Let me tell you a story of my people. When I was a young man, perhaps 20 winters, there was a woman in our tribe named Wakinyela. Her name means Little Thunder. She had been captured by the Crow during a raid and held for 3 years. When she finally escaped and returned to us, she was not the same person who had been taken. He paused, his eyes growing distant with memory. Wakinyela had scars, inside and out. She would not speak for months. She jumped at sudden movements. She could not bear to be touched, even by those who loved her. Some in the tribe whispered that she was broken, that her spirit had been crushed by her captivity. They pitied her, which in some ways was worse than if they had rejected her entirely. Sarah felt a connection to this unknown woman across time and culture. What happened to her? There was an elder woman, very wise, who took Wakinyela into her lodge. This elder did not treat her with pity. Instead, she gave her tasks, difficult tasks. She taught her to tan hides in the traditional way, a process that requires strength and patience. She taught her to make medicine from plants, knowledge that demands precision and care. She taught her the old songs, the ones that carry our history. Chief Tahatan's voice grew warmer with the telling. At first, Wakinyela struggled. Her hands shook. She made mistakes. She would sometimes stop in the middle of a task, overwhelmed by memories. But the elder never showed disappointment. She simply guided her back to the work, again and again. And slowly, through the repetition of these tasks, through the act of creating and contributing, Wakinyela began to reclaim herself. Did she get better? Sarah asked, her voice small. Did the memories stop haunting her? The chief shook his head. The memories never stopped. That is not how healing works. But she learned to carry them differently. She learned that her suffering had taught her things that others could not know, compassion for those in pain, wisdom about human cruelty, and a fierce appreciation for freedom and safety that those who have never lost these things cannot fully understand. She became one of our most valued healers because she understood suffering in a way that theory alone could never teach. He turned to face Sarah directly, his gaze intense but kind. You ask how your story shows strength, but you are asking the wrong question. Strength is not the absence of wounds. It is not measured by whether you were able to prevent harm. You were a child, and children cannot be expected to defeat the adults who should protect them. The shame belongs to your father, not to you. Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she forced them back. Then where is the strength? In running away? In hiding? The strength, Chief Tahatan said firmly, is in every morning you chose to wake up instead of surrendering to despair. It is in every step you took away from that house, every new city you traveled to alone, every job you worked, every moment you resisted the urge to believe the lies your father told you about your worth. You have survived when many would not have. That is extraordinary. But I'm still broken, Sarah whispered. I still can't trust people. I still have nightmares. I still carry these scars, inside and out. I still hurt myself sometimes when the pain becomes too much. How is that healing? The chief stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered plains. Healing is not a destination, Sarah Mitchell. It is a journey, and it is not linear. Some days you will feel strong. Other days you will feel as wounded as the day you left Philadelphia. Both are true. Both are acceptable. The question is not whether you are healed but whether you are still walking toward the light. He turned back to her. Among my people, when someone survives great hardship, we honor their survival. We do not ask them to pretend the hardship never happened or to act as if they emerged unchanged. We acknowledge that they have been to dark places and returned, and that this journey has given them knowledge the rest of us do not possess. This is why Wakanyela became a healer, not despite her suffering but because of it. What are you suggesting? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. I am suggesting that you stop running and start walking, the chief said gently. Running is born from fear. It gives your father power over you even in his absence. Walking is born from choice. It means you decide your direction not because you are fleeing from something but because you are moving toward something. Sarah stood, agitation making her restless. But I don't know what I'm moving toward. I have no family, no home, no purpose beyond survival. Oregon was just a convenient destination, a place far enough away that I might finally feel safe. But it's not a home. It's just another stopping point in an endless journey of escape. Chief Tahatan nodded slowly. Then perhaps it is time to choose a different destination. Not a place on a map but a purpose for your life. What would you do if you were not running? What matters to you beyond mere survival? The question hung in the air like the snow outside, delicate, persistent, transforming everything it touched. Sarah had spent so long focused on escape that she had never allowed herself to consider what might come after. What did she want? What mattered to her? I don't know, she admitted finally. I've never let myself think that far ahead. Then this is where your true journey begins, the chief said. Not in the running but in the choosing. The snow had stopped falling by the time Chief Tahatan and Sarah emerged from their corner of the trading post. The world outside was transformed, blanketed in fresh white that made everything look clean and new. Sarah stood at the threshold, breathing in the sharp cold air, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not a healing, not yet, but perhaps the first recognition that healing might be possible. Walk with me, Chief Tahatan said, and though it was phrased as a request, Sarah understood it was an invitation to something more significant than a simple stroll. She followed him away from the trading post, their feet crunching through the snow toward a small grove of bare trees that stood like sentinels against the winter sky. When they were alone, surrounded by the hushed quiet that only snowfall brings, the chief stopped and turned to face her. I told you about Wakanyela, but I did not tell you the end of her story. After she became a healer, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She chose to work specifically with captives who returned to the tribe, and with women who had suffered at the hands of men. She sought out the wounded, the ones others avoided because their pain was too uncomfortable to witness. Why? Sarah asked. Wouldn't that just remind her constantly of her own suffering? That is what many thought, the chief acknowledged. But Wakanyela understood something profound. She knew that her suffering had given her a gift, the ability to see and understand pain that others could not fully comprehend. When a returned captive sat across from her, unable to speak of what had been done to them, Wakanyela did not need words. She knew. And that knowledge created a bridge where none had existed before. He gestured toward the endless expanse of plain stretching beyond the grove. My people face many hardships. The white man pushes us from our lands, breaks treaties, brings disease and violence. Many of our women suffer as you have suffered, at the hands of white soldiers, traders, even sometimes our own men who have learned cruelty from the world around them. We need healers who understand this pain, who can help these women find their way back to themselves. Sarah's heart began to pound as she sensed where this conversation was leading. You want me to stay? To work with your people? I am offering you a choice, Chief Tahatan corrected gently. You can continue to Oregon, continue running toward a destination that holds no real meaning for you. You will be safe there, perhaps, though safety is an illusion we tell ourselves when we cannot face our fears. You will survive, but survival without purpose is its own form of death. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a tone of deep sincerity. Or you can choose to stop running. You can stay here, with my tribe, and learn to transform your suffering into something that serves others. It will not be easy. Facing pain daily, even in others, will sometimes reopen your own wounds. But you will not be alone in that work. We will support you as you learn our ways, our medicines, our understanding of healing that comes not from books but from the land itself. Sarah's mind raced with 1,000 objections. I don't speak your language. I don't know your customs. I'm white, why would your people trust me, accept me? And what about my father? What if he's still searching? Wouldn't I be putting your tribe in danger? Your father's reach does not extend to these plains, the chief said with certainty. His power exists only where his reputation exists. Here, he is nothing. As for the rest, language can be learned, customs can be taught, and trust must be earned. I will not pretend it will be simple. Some in my tribe are suspicious of all white people, and they have good reason for that suspicion. You will have to prove yourself through actions, not words. But I believe you have the strength to do this, even if you do not yet believe it yourself. Sarah turned away, overwhelmed. For 5 years, every decision had been about escape, about putting distance between herself and her past. The idea of stopping, of deliberately choosing to stay in one place and build something, was terrifying in a way that running had never been. Running she understood. Running was familiar. But this was stepping into complete unknown territory. Why are you offering this to me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know me. We met only hours ago. Why would you invite a stranger into your tribe, give her purpose, offer her a home? Chief Tahatan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of old grief. I had a daughter once. Her name was Makata, she who walks the earth. She was taken by white soldiers when she was 14 winters old. We searched for her, followed every trail, asked at every fort. We never found her. I do not know if she lives or if she has passed into the spirit world. I do not know if she suffered as you suffered or worse. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. Every day I wonder if someone showed her kindness. If anyone offered her help when she needed it most. If anyone saw her pain and chose to act rather than look away. I cannot help my daughter, I do not even know where she is. But I can help you. And in helping you, perhaps I honor her memory and fulfill a duty I could not fulfill for her. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now, unchecked and unstoppable. In all her years of suffering, no one had offered her kindness without expectation. No one had looked at her wounds and seen not weakness but possibility. No one had suggested that her pain might serve a purpose beyond mere survival. I'm afraid, she whispered. I'm afraid of hoping again. Every time I've let myself hope, it's been crushed. What if I stay and it doesn't work? What if I can't do what you think I can? What if I fail the people who trust me? Then you will have failed while trying something meaningful, which is infinitely better than succeeding at mere escape, the chief said firmly. Fear is not a reason to refuse. Fear is a sign that something matters enough to frighten you. The question is whether you will let that fear make your decisions or whether you will acknowledge it and choose differently. Sarah looked out at the snow-covered plains, imagining a life she had never allowed herself to consider. A life with purpose. A life where her scars, both visible and invisible, might serve to help others. A life where she was not defined by what had been done to her but by what she chose to do with that experience. If I stay, she said slowly, I need you to promise me something. Name it. Promise me that if I fail, if I cannot do this work, you won't see it as weakness. Promise me that I can leave if I need to, that I won't be trapped again. Chief Tahatan placed his hand over his heart. You will always be free to choose your path. That is not a privilege I grant you, it is a right you possess simply by being human. No one will trap you. No one will force you to stay. The choice will always be yours. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, sharp and clean. She thought of Mary, who had crossed an ocean to escape her past. She thought of Wakanyela, who had transformed her suffering into purpose. She thought of all the women who had survived terrible things and found ways to keep living, to keep hoping, to keep choosing light over darkness. Then I'll stay, she said, and the words felt like a door opening, like chains falling away, like the first step of a journey she had never imagined taking. I don't know if I can do what you think I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough or wise enough or healed enough. But I'm tired of running. I'm tired of letting my father's cruelty dictate every choice I make. If there's even a chance that my pain can help someone else, then it hasn't all been meaningless. Chief Tahaten smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his stern features into something warm and paternal. You have already taken the hardest step, Sarah Mitchell. You have chosen to stop running and start walking. Everything else will come in time. As they walked back toward the trading post, Sarah felt the weight she had carried for so long begin to shift. It did not disappear, she suspected it never would entirely. But it changed from an anchor holding her in place to something she could learn to carry differently, something that might even, impossibly, have value. The sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered world ablaze with light. And for the first time in 5 years, Sarah allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found her way home.